This is Designing Security Products, and where we talk about the intersection of product design and cybersecurity products. I'm William Donnell, lead design scientist at Sodium Halogen, and today I'm talking with Kamala Espig, who is the senior UX designer at Tidal Cyber. Tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do at Tidal. What do you do as a senior UX designer at Tidal?
Yeah, so we are a cybersecurity startup, so we're very early. I am the lead, the senior, the design team of one currently, which has been, kind of new, but also not exactly for me and many other designers when they hop in with a company and find out that, they're the solo designer or one of the early uh, designers in a company. Before that, I was at Dell and I worked on a kind of unique team that focused on building web components for, it was bucketed under a landing page team, which the components were utilized for many different parts and use cases and audiences. And then prior to that, I was at Science Logic, a network software monitoring company, where myself and three other designers supported six other dev teams, each like focused on their own uh, bits of the product. And then my backstory, I started out in biology and psychology, but I was working in small nonprofits and I was doing like their websites because, I always wanted to have the best MySpace page and things like that, and played World of Warcraft. That taught me a little bit of scripting. Uh, so I kind of just fell into the natural world of design and technology.
Nice, nice.
That's
There's so many interesting things there with your background, kind of places to dig in on. So let's start with. I know that you said that before you were working at Dell and some larger organizations. At one point, you were part of a team that was supporting several different development teams, and then now you're working on a startup. And how many people, ballpark, roughly are at Tidal? Is it like 20 or 50 or?
Yeah, definitely under 20. We're very small
Okay.
and very close, which is, I feel like, key to successful teams, or even, trying to be successful, is like closeness of communication and staying connected.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So from having this experience working at a large organization and then working with a smaller team, what are some of the big differences, or maybe even what are some things that kind of surprised you, maybe of kind of working in a smaller organization?
Yeah, I think working in a smaller team, I mean, as a designer, you have to have thick skin to take criticism and feedback. Well, at a smaller company, you might be the only one. So you have to have, a bit of knowledge, not that I know everything, definitely, but know how to find your inspiration, because it may not be within your virtual four walls of the company, or having people to collaborate with and, ask for feedback and get the kind of feedback that would be helpful versus, if someone's fixated on like a color and, that's, you're trying to get a
Mhm.
user flow going and, you know, it depends. It takes
Right.
sometimes a designer hat, and finding where to find these people and resources can be hard if you don't have a solid background and the confidence to find resources even within your company, or outside.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So you're talking about kind of resources outside of the organization. I know that you, if I understand correctly, you're also kind of moving from working on a product that's outside of the security world, and then now moving not just to a smaller team, but also kind of moving into the security world. So, what
Mhm.
were some things that were unique, or maybe some challenges you had in kind of transferring that over into cybersecurity?
Especially so, before I started at Science Logic, I was more heavy on the marketing side, and I worked at Identity Guard, which is like a LifeLock competitor. I think they got bought over by a different company.
Okay.
Entering a very B2B enterprise software space is very closed as far as like design and finding inspiration and, design patterns, because a lot of these, it's design and UX is sometimes like the afterthought. So you're coming in
Mm,
at Science Logic with a lot of like, foundational things and things that people are used to, which, being used to something doesn't necessarily mean that it's good practice. And sometimes breaking those, you know, patterns that have already been established, and then finding how to talk to your users without, crossing the lines with sales or uh, you know, creeping on competitors' demos online if they have, their demos online, and, seeing what they're doing could be a resource, but finding those resources and others in the field, it has been challenging. I mean, you and I
mm.
connected based on not finding too many, resources out there or people to connect to that are in the same like space.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's part of the reason that I wanted to start having conversations with folks in the security design space is just because I'm like you. I wasn't able to find a whole lot of resources that are out there and examples, and I want to learn and know more about this stuff. I was very fortunate early on to have a group of, at the time, website designers, but being able to share that information and get advice from people who knew more than me, which was everyone on the list, was just super helpful. So, um, are you able to bring in inspiration and techniques from outside of the security world and let those be influences on kind of what you're doing design and research wise in the security space?
Yes, and kind of my husband, he's a system admin. So sometimes I ask him about like best practices as far as like network software and
Mhm.
security too. So I try to talk to, other people, maybe not at my company or a competitor, but might be in my environment. And, being a very small community here and a lot of people are military background, I found talking to some of my friend groups, even, my kids went to Taekwondo, and speaking to one of the parents there, he was from Boeing, and, getting some insights from others and just kind of old school networking. Then, you know, user practice, being able to talk to your customers as well. And kind of, so when I first started at Tidal Cyber, I started taking a couple of like online cybersecurity courses so that I could get like my terms there and get some like foundational background of like some things that, my customers are like way beyond this. So at least I get like a little bit of foundational learning so that I could be, at least in the same book, not on the same page, but like maybe I'm on that blank page still. To get some background information, um, to set my mind up and see what this is related to in other fields that I've worked in. So the network software monitoring company, Science Logic, very technical, process oriented. Being there helped me today, and being able to, you know, figure out that, what, this is complicated, but at the end of the day, my users want to digest all of this information and data easily. And, focusing on that end
Mm,
goal of how I get to this easily digestible thing um, is always the problem in any space that we work in. So not getting overwhelmed with like nitty gritty, because our users will tell us what they want to see at the end, or what they're already the experts, and just listening to them has kind of helped me level out some of my like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here, because at the end of the day, we're all just solving a problem.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big believer, and I know that we've talked about this. You're a big believer too. That the best way to understand what the problems are that the customers have is to talk with them and watch them struggle through solving their problems. So maybe talk a little bit about some of the maybe some techniques that have worked really well to help you find people to user test with, even some of the challenges of finding people to user test with.
Definitely. Challenges, we can't just go out and talk to. just customers because, you know, I'm at a startup and me just going out there speaking, about the product is it could be harmful. And, you have to go through some red tape. So collaborating with others in your organization, working with the sales team, and talking to your PM saying, hey, we've got these things on our roadmap. Maybe we can talk to customer experience or sales to see, you know, which customers might align to giving us some like early feedback or even late feedback if they've been with us for a while. On certain features. And then, maybe can you give us like 5 minutes at the end of like your next like call with them or check in? Building that habit of checking in with customer experience or sales, showing them that, you can do a little user testing that's not too invasive and it won't mess up their sales call at the same time. We've had a few success stories that, we were able to close a sale because we were able to pitch something really early on, or, getting feedback from our customers in these calls, getting the feedback going back to us is another challenge too. You know, sometimes, we're all busy and getting that feedback both ways can be challenging, and figuring out
Mm.
how that can happen without causing anyone else to have to do a heavy lift is also another habit. So us connecting this way and collaborating with our customers to get feedback, and we found, building the habit of how to share it in a collective place has really helped us be able to continue doing this and improving. And it's showing in our sales and it's showing in our product and our experiences from our users. They're, more happy, or they feel empowered to actually tell us about things, which is another thing. Like, not hearing anything could mean, no news is good news, but also could mean, now we're shelfware. Nobody wants to be shelfware. We want to be, used as much as possible and be helpful.
And that's what I was going to talk about specifically is this conversation that you're having with sales of sharing information. One of the things that I have seen is that the sales team and people that are having conversations with customers and prospects are gathering all this great information, but then on the other side you've got the product team that is also having conversations with customers and with prospects. A lot of times there's not a great way necessarily, and it's not a tools thing necessarily. I think it's probably a technique, and like you said, just kind of getting in the habit of that, of sharing
Hmm.
this information and realizing that there's valuable information that each of those teams is having with customers, and if they can get in the habit of sharing it with one another, then everybody wins. So are there specific techniques that you've used to help share that information? Is it kind of an ad hoc thing, or are there like regularly scheduled touch points that you have with, say, customer experience or sales?
Definitely. We do a little bit of all. We did start with Confluence. I love Confluence, but uh, it was it got buried between like other documentations. Not sure when things were last updated. So, we test ran working with different tools and ways about sharing the information, and just that didn't work at the moment for us. It's great for like note taking and things, but we started using Rike, which, like you said, is not a matter of tools, but it does have the ability to tag things so that we could organize certain tags and map them to features or roadmap items or even people, so that we could easily share and connect these like feedbacks or bugs or anything in one place without any of the extra like clutter. Slack, everything could be in there, from like there's a major bug to hey, I'm going to be out tomorrow kind of thing. But having like a very like focused platform software, whichever way that you want to go about it, with everyone having the same like access, I think is key. But um, it takes a habit of like continuing to use it and communicating what's working or what's not working for you too early on with your team um, will help because if something's not working for you and the rest of the people are using it, then there's no point. Like you're not getting the desired value when you can communicate about it.
Sure. Yeah. So when you're talking about collaborating with the rest of the team, um,
Mhm,
I know that we had talked a little bit before about just the process of communication with the product development team too, and
mhm,
just kind of making sure that there is good handoff, good communication, that the information is being shared to be able to. I mean, when you're working in a startup, then there's always you've got to move quickly, right? You know, everybody's
mhm.
wanting to pick up the pace and when can this be done yesterday. So are there any advice that you would give for folks in your position on making sure that you have good communication with the development team, the product team?
Yes, like I'm very close with all of my developers, even at Science Logic when we had worked with several different teams. I try to stay in communication with them so that I can like pick up hints and bits of how they work and how they see things and what do they need to be successful too. And like everything in UX and design, we have to be flexible. There's these beautiful like handoff documents that look fantastic. But if you pass it on to certain teams, like this is just a waste of time. It's just fluff. When, another team might just need a user flow. Like they don't need the drop shadows documented on this paper because we already have like a style guide that's established in a design system. You know, working and pivoting and staying closely connected to your developers and asking like the blunt question of like, is this helpful? Like, what would be better that I did here? Should I, spend an extra hour and make a clickable prototype to help? Or is this good with knowing where the functionality goes?
Yeah, is it maybe a little bit like good design has just enough just enough functionality or just enough that's there. Like you don't want to make it any more complicated than it has to be, but it has to have all of the functionality. So is it kind of like when you're working with the dev team having just enough documentation for them to be able to move forward, then you're not being wasteful or inefficient?
Yes, and then finding the sweet spot between design is never done, but sometimes there's a sweet spot that design is ready enough that development can continue. And, that could mean design is done from the point of documentation and they can continue, or it could mean, you're working on some of the other aspects like the hovers and uh, providing some of context or providing the tooltips or anything like that. They're just, and every feature and everything is different too. So I feel like you have to come in with an open, like have a set standard, of course, but have an open mind to be able to be flexible and to talk about what's needed. We've actually been experimenting with finding the sweet spot of like how many meetings do we need for certain features, and depending on how small it is, you might need like a first look. You might need an official handover. You might have like another meeting to like iterate over things that just didn't make sense. But, it all takes that, the back and forth, the making sure that you're stay connected and talk about what's necessary and what's needed.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It sounds like what you're saying is the biggest thing is just making sure that you have tight communication and tight collaboration with the development team. Have sometimes that's in meetings, but otherwise it's just kind of having that rapport. So there's trust that you as the design team, whether you're a solo or whether you have a small team that's there, you're kind of trusting what the developers do, and you want to make sure that the developers are trusting what you're doing as well. Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, I know that we had also talked a little bit about being kind of the first design person at Tucker. You mentioned, I think, something, and it might not have been it might not have been this company. It might, we can just say any company. And so I personally would love to know what, tell me some stories about what went well or what you wish had been done to kind of set you up for success coming in behind a external design team.
Yes. So, um, came in, we had worked with an outside agency to, get the foundational support. So I think when, you hire your first official designer and you assume that you have like a design system, you have, all of these foundational components ready to, hand over to this new designer. But, the new designer comes in and they look at the house and, the house is nice, but like, this flooring, like the carpet is falling apart. um, so sometimes there's some assumptions because not everybody knows and understands design, and we can't teach everyone everything, but there's a lot of assumptions that if there's a mock-up of something, then it can be like replicated easily, or certain things were taken into account as far as like the design system. So, for instance, coming into a team that had an agency do the design system prior, I'm not sure how much communication was done with the dev
Mm-hmm.
team was one of the issues. Everything was designed custom, which okay is okay, but um, if you spoke with the dev team, you would have found out that they had a component library, they were using MUI, and there was just that huge disconnect. So coming into this custom made design system, and my dev team is using MUI component library and material, everything, and I had kind of two choices: continue with this completely custom design system and build upon it. um, Not that it was better or worse than, material, versus this one design library foundation that's, tested, proven that it works well. Our dev team's comfortable with working with the components. We already have the style sheets loaded up. So I made the decision to, go with our dev team and, build a newish design system based on, our foundations that we're actually living in and, have a future in. You know, I was lucky and blessed that my company, like, they support me, and I was able to articulate this, that we this design system does live, but it's not so helpful. And my company was like, gotcha, we understand. I had, before I had this conversation, I had a sort of game plan in my head. Like, there's, as one designer, there's not time for me to just sit down and hammer out like a design system right now and put all these features like as like a future thing. Like, no, we wouldn't be successful. So, I mentioned, as we uh, redesign or design new features, I'll go back in and, update there too, so that, both things are getting done at the same time. So that was one of the things coming in to, a company that had a agency before. Um, that, and I'm not sure if there was like any like domain knowledge or like user testing as far as like uh, making sure things made sense. I know there's not necessarily enough time to do a deep dive with customers as a hired third party, because the more time that you're there, the more money it's going to take to from the company as well. So uh, you know there was kind of a disconnect as far as like, is this what we want to show? Is this like tedious or not? Like, coming into this, you have the assumption that, we at least have a good foundation. Well, you know, as a hired designer, I'm allowed to talk to our customers and users finding out like there's a huge disconnect is a little bit painful, but having a supportive company with you makes it feel a little bit better because you're all trying to work towards the same goal of doing something better or different, um, in a better way. So I think, you know, those have been my bad experiences. I guess on the good side to that is like when I do redesign areas, it really shows and I get a lot of like thumbs up and like good job. But at this, at the same time, I'm like, I just listen to people. You know, it's a good job, thank you. But, I just listen to the problem and maybe, the agency didn't have that opportunity.
All right. Do you feel like a lot of third-party teams put enough emphasis on the UX side of things, or that they're, I hate to say, just making pretty pictures, but I mean they're kind of working off of the assumptions, and they're probably well-founded assumptions of the founding team, and kind of neglecting the feedback from customers from their perspective.
I do think that I want to say like they do give their due diligence with what they are given. I mean, that's what we all do. Like we try to do the best with what we have. Um, but I think also one thing that we mentioned in the beginning was that it's not that easy to find super complex B2B cybersecurity network monitoring software inspiration or patterns or insights, out there. So I assume from an agency perspective that doesn't have a deep understanding of these domains,
Mm.
it would be also hard for them. So they would maybe, you know, grab a hold of some like deeply researched patterns that might not be great or, might not work so well with this lens on. So you know, I think there's a little bit of a disadvantage that maybe they don't have the domain knowledge or the access to certain things that, we have a little bit of a VIP door into, the cybersecurity space because that's where we are and we're connecting with people in the field. But, they have to be open because it's very broad. So I think they're working at a disadvantage, but I don't think it's out of, just making the pretty picture. But I do feel like maybe there's an opportunity for them to like connect a bit more with, like the foundational things of working with like the MUI component library. Maybe a bit more communication with, not only just the person that hires you or the owners of the company or the founders about, being hired or getting those insights or the brief when you start, but actually talking to the people who are building the product might be helpful too to get, at least talking the same language.
Sure. So if you were going to give advice to a third party design company that was creating a foundational design for a product, and then knowing that eventually someone is going to come in and be that first UX UI hire, right? What is the advice that you would say? Like, hey, you've got to make sure that you get this, this, and this right. What would some of those things be? And make sure you avoid this, this, and this, right?
Right. I would definitely say uh, talk to like the head of engineering to find out what coding language, scripts, whatever platform you're going to be on. Um, if possible, a roadmap so that
Mm,
you know how this product may evolve over time, so that you can help with that. I mean, if you're going to have like themes, maybe setting up from the beginning that your design system can support like theming of the
mm,
product. If it's okay, speaking to the developers who are, touching it and building it all the time. I think I would, as a company that's starting up fresh, I wouldn't say avoid, making a completely custom design system, but I think it would be more cost efficient and helpful for that first designer coming in to use an established design system or component library so that, you know, a startup needs to move fast and that, you know, there's not a bottleneck on design because design is literally building, you know, not buttons from scratch, but, you know, they're literally building these foundational pieces from scratch. So perhaps like weigh in on, you know, using a established pattern library instead of from scratch, I think might be helpful for, you know, different uh, age of a company like startup. That would be great. Let's see, things I wouldn't do. I think the start from scratch if you're a startup. I think so. I I mean, walking to anyone's like Figma file that you haven't created, it can be like, oh my God, what did I just walk into? Um, just some housekeeping and just, you know, like I'm not a stickler for like naming every single layer, but maybe if a comment's not helpful, like remove it, resolve it, uh, make some kind of logic as far as like, you know, where things are like in a page or a frame, just some basic housekeeping would be a huge thing.
Were you able to have a conversation with the previous designers, or was it just kind of like they uh, left it like here it is, and then you just kind of came in and you like metaphorically opened the door and here's all the things that are here, but I don't have any information about why these decisions were made. Like, was there any communication with the previous design?
Right. So there was a middle woman in between the I'm not sure if she was originally from the agency or not, but
Mm.
the agency was there first, and then she was a contractor, you know, in the meantime between hiring a full-time person. So I was able to speak with her. You know, she told me all the stuff that was under the rug about the design, but she didn't have that foundational learning either. We were passed on like a Miro board of our personas in quotes and, you know, user flow, but it was we didn't have that understanding that this agency had the understanding about our users or a flow or anything like that at the moment.
Okay, I've got to ask about the personas, air quotes.
Yes. Well, it was from the perspective of them not having much domain knowledge. So it was like a copy and pasted Confluence page from us on there without any, you know, like digestion of it. Like, you know, figuring out like, are there different flavors of CISOs? Like, there was no development in it. It went from like copy paste Confluence page to pretty pictures. And that's where the disconnect came from. And, you know, she had frustrations with, you know, that disconnect too, and not having, like you said, the background of why decisions were made and how we got to certain layouts. Like, what was the reason, or how did we get here?
Maybe tell me about, and I think you did just kind of tell me about something, but maybe tell me about something since you've been at Tidal that kind of went wrong, and then how did you what was it, and what did you do about it?
See, what wrong? I don't think anything has
It doesn't
really
have to be like
gone.
a big epic flipping.
Yeah, I think well, it was something that came up from our like face to face. We had a sync all together with everyone in the company because we're mostly remote. And we came in with intentions to redesign a new feature. But in our conversations there, we ended up refining a feature that we already had out that has been a huge success. Like everyone's happy that we redesigned this thing. And, you know, that came out of, you know, intentions of doing something completely else. So it wasn't like a bad thing. We're still going to do that other thing, but this one took the place of our time at the moment, but has made a significant positive improvement.
Okay, awesome. So you were talking about doing research and kind of coming up with this feature, right?
Mhm,
That you were working on. How do you think we as designers that are working in the security space can balance, can not become just a feature farm, right?
mhm.
We're able to balance the tactical thing of here's this feature that customers are asking for, or that is really important to the business objectives, something that the C-suite thinks is really important. How do you balance doing research and design on that versus being more strategic and understanding the customer and the customer's problems, maybe that are outside of what your specific product does, so that there are opportunities for you to say, oh, here's this problem we can solve for our customer that we would not have even known about. How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, I think one, working with my manager, the director of product, and making sure that we do have a good balance of those things. We both want those things, and we know, you know, I can only do so much, and he can only do so much too, as far as, writing requirements and digging into research as well. So I think, having that up there support with
Mm-hmm.
having, the want and the necessary, like the need of finding some other areas in the product that aren't so big and shiny and pretty,
Mm-hmm.
um, and showing that value in refining some of those things. I think having the support of someone up, and then myself. Um, I'm all like our screenshots, folders. I'm sure all designers have like tons of them where you see something that's like, oh no. But I do have like a running list in Confluence that, I've shared with my manager that, of just things, that, exist that, aren't so great, or, in Reich we have the customer feedback, and some of them could be like, this tooltip is, I don't understand it. It could be something small like that. So at least keeping track of those things, so that when you are maybe working on either a new feature or redesigning a feature, that you can pull those things in. So like we were tweaking one design, and adding something to it, and it's like, well, this is a great opportunity to work on the panel that configures it too, because some of these fields, we could rearrange things, and now that we're doing this other pattern, that we can update this one here with it. So, you know, trying to be clever, and, connecting the bits and pieces where you can, if it's possible to update, multiple things at a time. And then, working with a small dev team, there's, very small front end, back end. And if you do know how to, like, figure out yourself what is a heavy front end work, what is a heavy back end work, and making your own kind of like judgment as far as like, I think this is a small, and maybe I should, like, send this in the dev Slack team and see like what they, hey, oh, I can fix that like really quickly. Or,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, the pipeline is very slow, and maybe I can push out a couple of these like small improvements then. Or I see that we're all like swamped, don't let me like interrupt with this, like, I need this tooltip updated kind of thing, because you know I mean, it's kind of like paying attention, like read the room a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but also, you have to be an advocate for, making a better user experience, and you know keeping track of the things and knowing where you can fit it in, is key, I think.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. It is a tricky thing to balance, though, right? Kind of
It
those two things.
definitely is.
Yeah. All right. This has been great. I've got one last question for you. Um, from the little bit of research that I've done, it seems like early stage security companies don't necessarily put a lot of emphasis on design to begin with. There's a huge emphasis on engineering, absolutely well founded, and maybe in something in products that are more consumer based, design seems to be an earlier hire or an earlier priority. So, what is advice that you would give to an early stage security company about the importance of or when to bring in design and UX research into the process.
Yeah, I think it totally makes sense that, design is not necessarily one of the first components when starting with a startup. I think startups need to make sure the level of uh, comfortability that the designer or designers have themselves, how confident they are, how they communicate, because small teams, everyone has to have some of these like soft skills to be a little bit pushy if necessary, and know how to read a room if necessary as well. So I think uh, experience is great, but also making sure that personality matches, and the ability to be very independent too. I think is huge. I mean, any like probably the dev team too, and have to be like a problem solver and kind of figure things out on your own if necessary. I think I would give advice for startups hiring the first designers, and you know, like I said, experience is great,
Okay.
but also knowing how they work on their own.
Gotcha. That's great. What about the founder who thinks that, well, we'll just kind of put lipstick on a pig later on, and the design is this layer that you put on after you figure the stuff out? How would you talk to that founder? Or well, so do you think this is true? And if so, how would you communicate it that the research side of the UX research is foundational and should be done earlier in the process, and that it's not about making pretty pictures, but it's the foundational work? How would you communicate that to them if you agree?
Yeah, yeah, I would run for the hills. um, like, I mean,
Oh, okay.
but I would, if I had to deal with that, I would first, I would point out the fact that you're hiring me, so
Mm,
that means that you care about something more than just like the pretty pictures, because if you wanted like just a basic graphic designer, that would have been cheaper. Um, a little bit of knowledge helps too, like informing them. It could be, like an article or something that you find, or you could do, a weekly design talk within your company that talks about, if we do a little bit of research on, we can't maybe do a whole design sprint on like every single feature that we make,
mm,
but you could do one, a shorter one, to prove, how successful things are if we do things the design way, or design thinking, or, you know, sharing, like how to whiteboard was one huge thing at one company that I worked with. And, they were like, I didn't know we could do this and collaborate this way. And, this went really well. Like you took my chicken scratch, like mock up, and we made something from this. I'm like, yes. And we wouldn't have been able to do this so well if not for all of us,
mm.
even with, the chicken scratch. But I think a little knowledge goes a long way. But at the end of the day, also, unless you're like extremely desperate for a position, having to prove your worth is, you know, a battle that I'm not necessarily willing to to push, if because it feels like a conflict, like is this going to be always a battle for me? And you know we just want happy customers at the end of the day. And if we can't get on the same page with, you know you have your business thinking, I have my design thinking, and we need to work together. There's a middle ground to figure it out. And not saying their way is wrong. Like we definitely need it to be attractive looking product, but you know got to know what it does and what it should do.
Yeah, great. Kamala, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking with you and getting some insights from you. And so I really appreciate you taking the time today.
This has
Awesome.
been great.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.